All right, let's dive into this. Cannabinoids and their effects on your gut, specifically IBS and Crohn's disease.
Fascinating area. Lots of research coming out now.
Yeah, you gave us a ton to go through.
We've got textbook excerpts, research papers.
And some of this stuff gets seriously in-depth, like PhD level deep.
Yeah, right. Even breaking down cannabinoid signaling pathways.
Really getting into those complex cellular interactions.
CB1 and CB2 receptors, G protein activation, all that.
A whole shebang.
It is. It's fascinating stuff. Really shows the potential of cannabinoids for treating all kinds of things.
But before we even get there, right, to really get how they work on GI issues.
We got to start with the endocannabinoid system itself.
Okay, so back up a sec for some of our listeners. The endocannabinoid system, what's that in a nutshell?
It's this incredible network in our bodies.
It's not just about getting high, is it?
No, not at all. It's much more than that. It helps regulate tons of things.
Like what?
Pain, inflammation, and, yeah, digestion, too.
So it's about keeping things running smoothly.
It's all about balance, yeah. Maintaining balance within the body.
Okay, makes sense. And so within this system, you have these key players.
The cannabinoid receptors, primarily CB1 and CB2.
Like little docking stations.
Exactly. Imagine them as tiny doorways on the surface of cells.
And different cannabinoids are like the keys.
Right. Different keys for different doors.
That trigger specific effects within the cell.
Right. Unlocking all kinds of different responses.
Okay, that's a good analogy. Now, zooming in on the gut specifically.
You've got both CB1 and CB2 receptors all throughout your digestive system.
But one is more common, right?
CB2, yeah, it's particularly abundant in the gut, especially on immune cells.
So that's where a lot of the action is happening.
Right, when certain cannabinoids bind to these CB2 receptors.
It's like flipping a switch, influencing the activity of those cells.
Exactly, and that impacts things like inflammation and pain.
Got it. So how does this all tie into GI motility?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, GI motility, it's all about muscle contractions.
The muscles that move food through your system, right?
Exactly, and research shows cannabinoids can actually have dual effects.
Meaning what?
They can sometimes speed it up and sometimes slow it down.
Whoa, that's kind of weird.
It is, right. Depends on the cannabinoid and the condition.
So depending on the type of cannabinoid.
It could potentially help with either diarrhea or constipation.
Huh. That's pretty wild. And this balance thing we were talking about.
It's crucial for conditions like IBS, where you've got all those motility issues.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've got Crohn's disease.
With Crohn's, it's all about chronic inflammation, right?
So those CB2 receptors on immune cells become even more important.
Exactly. They're really key players in how cannabinoids might help.
So tell me more about that.
Well, inflammation, it involves the release of these signaling molecules called cytokines.
Okay, right. I remember that term.
And what's fascinating is that certain cannabinoids can actually reduce their production.
These pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Right. Effectively calming down the immune system's attack on the gut lining.
It's like they're peacekeepers, telling the immune system to chill out a bit.
That's a great way to put it. And of course, less inflammation often means less pain, too.
Yeah, that's a big relief for folks with these conditions.
Absolutely. But there's another way cannabinoids can affect pain as well.
Oh, really? Fill me in.
It's through a separate mechanism directly influencing pain signals.
How do they do that?
That's where all of that complex signaling pathway stuff comes in.
Okay, let's get into it. You mentioned GPCR activation before, conformational changes, G proteins, all those things.
All right, you ready for the molecular details?
Lay it on me, I'm ready.
Okay, so those CB1 and CB2 receptors, remember?
Yeah, our little doorways.
Right. They belong to a family of proteins called G protein-coupled receptors, or GPCRs for short.
Catchy name.
Right. And when a cannabinoid binds to one of these receptors...
It sets off a whole chain reaction inside the cell.
Exactly, like dropping a pebble into a pond, the ripples spread out.
Okay, I like that. So the cannabinoid binding is that initial pebble.
And then boom, triggers a cascade of events.
Okay, walk me through those events.
So first, the cannabinoid binds to the receptor, and that causes a conformational change.
Weaving.
The receptor, it twists and contorts, kind of like a key turning in a lock.
So it's changing shape.
Right. And this allows it to interact with G proteins.
Okay, G proteins remind me.
They're these molecular messengers inside the cell waiting for instructions.
Okay, and the activated receptor gives them those instructions.
Precisely. It's like the receptor calls in the G proteins for action.
And what happens next?
Well, G proteins, they're made up of different subunits. Think of them like puzzle pieces.
Okay, got it.
And when the receptor activates the G protein...
Those pieces break apart.
Right, they dissociate and then interact with other molecules in the cell.
Like a domino effect.
One event triggering the next, that's a good way to picture it.
So what are these other molecules they interact with? What are they doing?
Well, some of these G proteins, like the ones called gyneos,
Gaios.
they can inhibit the production of a molecule called cyclic AMP.
KMP. Okay. Another one of those.
Right. But CMP, it's important. It's a messenger, too.
What's its job?
It influences a bunch of cellular processes.
Like what specifically?
Well, one thing it does is activate an enzyme called protein kinase A.
Protein kinase A or PKA?
Right, and PKA in turn can activate other signaling pathways.
Like which ones?
Like the MAPK pathway, you mentioned that one in your request.
Okay, right. So we're getting deep into the weeds here. What's the MAPK pathway all about? Why is it so important for pain?
Well, it's kind of like a complex communication network inside the cell, lots of branches.
Like what?
You've got the ERK, JNK, and P38 pathways, the ones you specifically asked about.
Right, right. And these are involved in...
All kinds of stuff, but for our purposes, they're key for inflammation and pain signaling.
Okay, I see. So by influencing these pathways, by activating or deactivating them...
Cannabinoids could potentially mess with how pain signals travel.
From the gut to the brain, right?
Exactly. They can interfere with those communication lines.
Wow, so we're talking about these tiny molecules
Cannabinoids.
triggering these incredibly complex cascades of events at the cellular level.
And potentially leading to pain relief. It's pretty amazing.
It is. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is, and it all goes to show just how powerful the endocannabinoid system is.
Yeah, and we've only just begun to uncover its secrets.
Absolutely. There's so much more to learn. It's incredible, right, how these tiny molecules can do so much.
And we haven't even talked about calcium yet.
Oh, yeah, good point. Calcium's a big deal in all of this, too.
I saw it mentioned in some of those papers you gave me, but I don't really get how it fits in.
So calcium, it's like this crucial messenger inside cells.
Okay, messenger meaning...
It triggers a bunch of different processes.
Like what?
Muscle contractions, for one.
Oh, right, so that ties into motility.
Exactly. And also the release of neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters, those are...
The chemicals that nerve cells use to talk to each other.
So it's involved in pain signaling, too, then.
Bingo! You're getting it.
And cannabinoids, they can affect calcium levels?
Right, in a couple of different ways.
Okay, tell me more.
Remember those G proteins we were talking about?
Yeah, the ones that break apart and set off the domino effect.
Exactly. Well, some of them can activate this enzyme called phospholipase C.
Phospholipase C, that's a mouthful.
We'll just call it PLC for short.
All right, PLC, what does it do?
It breaks down this molecule called PIP2.
PIP2, where's that?
It's in the cell membrane.
Okay.
And when PLC breaks it down, it creates two other important molecules.
Okay.
DEG and IP3.
More acronyms?
I know. It's a lot to keep track of.
But it's all connected somehow, right?
Oh, absolutely. In this case, the one we're really interested in is IP3.
IP3, why is that one special?
Well, IP3, it binds to these receptors on this structure called the endoplasmic reticulum.
To what?
The endoplasmic reticulum. It's basically a storage facility for calcium.
Oh, okay. So IP3 goes and unlocks the calcium vault.
Perfect analogy. It triggers the release of calcium into the cell's cytoplasm.
A cytoplasm being...
The fluid that's all around the cell's internal structures.
Yes.
And when all this calcium floods the cytoplasm...
It sets off even more stuff, right?
Exactly. A whole cascade of events.
Like?
Well, remember the MAPK pathways we talked about?
Yeah, the ones involved in pain and inflammation.
This surge of calcium can activate those pathways too.
So it's like a chain reaction within a chain reaction.
That's a good way to put it. It's all interconnected.
Cannabinoids affect calcium. Calcium affects MEPK pathways. MEPK pathways affect pain and inflammation.
It's a complex web, but that's the gist of it.
Fascinating. You know, while we're on the topic of specific conditions...
Yeah, you wanted to focus on IBS and Crohn's, right?
Exactly. We've talked about all this molecular stuff, but how does it actually translate to treating people?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's tricky because these conditions are so complex.
Everyone experiences them differently.
Exactly. But we can try to connect the dots.
By looking at the specific symptoms and how those relate to what we know about cannabinoids.
Right. So let's start with IBS.
Okay. IBS. One of the main things people with IBS struggle with is abdominal pain.
And we've talked about how cannabinoids can influence pain signaling, so...
Theoretically, they could help reduce that pain.
That's the idea. But it's not just about inflammation, remember?
Right. We talked about other mechanisms, too.
There's also visceral hypersensitivity.
Visceral hypersensitivity, meaning...
The nerves in the gut are basically super sensitive. They overreact to stimuli.
Oh, I see.
And some research suggests that cannabinoids might help reduce that hypersensitivity.
So they're calming those nerves down, turning down the volume on the pain signals.
Exactly.
That makes sense. What about the other fun stuff that comes with IBS?
You mean diarrhea and constipation?
Yeah, all those lovely motility issues.
We talked about how cannabinoids can affect motility, but...
It's not always clear which ones will do what, right?
That's the thing. It's not so straightforward. The effect depends on a bunch of factors.
Like what?
The dosage, for one. And also, each person's endocannabinoid system is unique.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And then there's the other compounds in cannabis. Those can play a role too.
It's complicated, basically.
It is. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So trial and error is still a big part of finding the right treatment.
Unfortunately, yes. And it's crucial to work with a doctor who understands cannabinoids.
Someone who can help you figure out the right dose and type for your specific situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, now what about Crohn's disease? We talked about the inflammation.
Right, and how cannabinoids might be able to reduce that by acting on those CB2 receptors on immune cells.
So could this actually help people with Crohn's, like, in real life?
There's definitely some promising research out there.
Like what?
Well, studies have shown that cannabinoids can reduce inflammation in animals with Crohn's-like symptoms.
Okay, that's a good start.
And there have been some small trials in humans, too.
Yeah.
The results suggest that cannabinoids might help with things like abdominal pain.
What you've already talked about.
Right, but also diarrhea and even weight loss.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It is, but remember, we still need more research.
What kind of research?
Well, long-term safety, for one. Most of the studies so far have been pretty short.
So we don't really know what the effects might be down the line.
Exactly. And we also need more research on dosage and delivery methods.
Right, like how much should people take and how should they take it?
Exactly. There are so many different ways to consume cannabinoids.
Smoking, vaping, edibles, tinctures, all that.
And each method has its pros and cons.
So finding the optimal way to get those beneficial compounds to the gut, that's key.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's individual variability.
Right, we talked about that.
We need to figure out how to personalize cannabinoid therapy.
Based on things like genetics, gut microbiome, all that.
It's a big challenge, but that's where the future of this field lies.
This is all so complex, but it's fascinating, you know?
It really is, and it all connects back to those signaling pathways we were talking about before.
The MAPK pathway, the ERK, JNK, and P38 components, all that.
By understanding those pathways, we can hopefully develop more targeted therapies.
Therapies that address the root causes of these conditions, not just mask the symptoms.
Exactly.
And don't forget about those second messengers.
Ds and IP3.
Right, right. Understanding how those fit in is crucial, too.
It all adds to the bigger picture.
It's like we're piecing together a giant puzzle.
One tiny molecule at a time.
And with each piece, we get closer to unlocking the full potential of cannabinoid therapy.
It's an exciting time to be in this field, that's for sure.
It really makes you think, you know, all this stuff going on.
At the microscopic level, these tiny interactions.
They can have such big effects.
Yeah, it's incredible. It shows just how complex our bodies are.
And how interconnected everything is, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just separate systems working in isolation.
It's all one big web.
And the endocannabinoid system, it's like a thread running through all of it.
You know, one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of balance.
Right, we talked about that before. The endocannabinoid system is always trying to maintain equilibrium.
Like a seesaw, trying to keep things level.
That's a good way to think about it. It's not about turning things on or off completely.
It's more about fine-tuning, making adjustments.
Finding that sweet spot, restoring harmony.
And cannabinoids, they seem to play a role in that fine-tuning.
Right, they can modulate the activity of different cells and pathways.
Like little conductors guiding the orchestra.
I like that analogy. Bringing all the different instruments into balance.
But it's a delicate process, right?
It is, yeah. There's still so much we don't know.
Individual variability, finding the right dose.
The right delivery method, avoiding side effects.
It's complicated.
It is, and we need to move away from those simplistic ideas about cannabinoids.
Like thinking they're either good or bad, a miracle cure, or a dangerous drug.
Right. It's much more nuanced than that.
Their effects depend on so many factors.
And we need more research to really understand those nuances.
To figure out how to use them safely and effectively.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the context.
Our bodies are not machines.
No, they're complex ecosystems.
With all these intricate feedback loops and interactions.
And the more we learn about those systems, the better we can navigate them.
You know, it's kind of humbling. when you think about it.
Yeah.
This amazing system within us, the endocannabinoid system.
Constantly working to keep things in balance, even when we're not aware of it.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is, and it makes you wonder about its potential in other areas.
We focused on GI disorders, but
The endocannabinoid system is involved in so many different things.
mood, stress, immunity, even protecting the brain.
The possibilities are endless.
So cannabinoids could have therapeutic applications beyond just the gut.
Oh, absolutely. As we keep researching, we're likely to find even more uses for them.
It's an exciting time to be in this field.
It is. There's so much potential for discovery.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's incredible to think that these tiny molecules can do so much.
And triggers such complex cascades of events, leading to real therapeutic benefits.
It's a testament to the power of nature, really.
And the ingenuity of our own bodies.
And it shows how much we still have to learn.
Oh, definitely. We're just scratching the surface.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, yeah. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you for sharing your expertise.
It was my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And I hope our listeners enjoyed learning about it too.
I hope so. It's important for people to understand the potential of cannabinoids.
But also the importance of doing your research
And talking to your doctor.
to make sure they're right for you.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power when it comes to your health.
Well said. Thanks again for joining me.
Anytime.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in and keep exploring.